right. So we're starting off today with a micro panel, and our topic is sharing best practices in remote user support and training, something that I think is of great interest to all of us right now. Our micro panel has Amy Nesser, who's from Berkeley, and we have Anita Ornt from University of Utah. And they're both going to just share some things about their experiences around both remote support and remote training. So go ahead, Anita, why don't you get us going?
Okay, thank you, Jana. So we're going to talk about online support first. Is that
yes,
the direction
ahead.
you want to take?
Yep,
okay. So a little bit of background. So as Jana mentioned, I'm at the University of Utah, but we have for the last several years also provided research computing support for Utah State University. And the two institutions are about 100 miles or so. And so we've been dealing with remote support and remote trainings for several years now. And, you know, everybody right now is getting familiar with Zoom, but we've been using Zoom for that purpose for a few years. So in terms of our online support and what we do and how things may have changed is we have never established office hours that I know a lot of centers support teams have. We have a support team of 4, and for the most part, for people that are on our campus, you know, we deal with tickets. We have ServiceNow for ticketing, and you know, of course, a lot of users bypass that and email one of our support team members directly, just whoever they're comfortable with working with. And so between service tickets and emails are the, you know, the main ways we interact with users. And as always, you know, sometimes tickets are a very quick answer and we can just answer and we're done with. But when things become a little more in depth or that it makes sense, we just sort of say, hey, why don't we just set up an appointment, come to my office, I'll come to your office, we'll sit down together where we're both at our computers and we can work through. With our Utah State users, that's not possible, though we do make a few trips up there a year. For the most part, we've just done it all remotely through phone calls. And one of the other tools that we use, and I have never used it, and I don't know if any of my colleagues are on that have, but we used FastX as a tool for SSH sessions with X forwarding, and they have a session sharing option. And I believe Martin especially may have some experience, and if people want to know more, perhaps he can chime in on that. So that is the way we go. But, you know, up until now, you know, when we were in the office, we basically, you know, people would walk in without even saying they were coming. But for the most part, we tried to encourage that we just set up at a time that we could get together either on phone or in person and go from there. The challenges, of course, are the people that you're talking to following what you're saying? Are they following along? And yeah, I really don't have any real solutions with that. And I believe that's where the FastX sharing would work, and actually encourage them while we're on the call saying, you know, pull this up, go to here, SSH in, do this. At least make sure that they can get on and get started. So should I break here and go on to teach, that
sounds great.
Amy?
Yeah, Amy, can you give us a little roundup about how you're providing remote support?
Yeah, definitely. So as was mentioned, my name is Amy Nesser, and I'm at UC Berkeley in the research IT department there, and I'm the consulting and outreach lead. So I manage the consulting program. And unlike the example that you were just hearing, we haven't really been providing remote support up until now, up until we've needed to. A lot of our services have been built on in-person sessions. So a little bit of context with that is that we put data and computing together. We used to have 2 separate teams, and the data were like librarians and people like that. And computing was mixed between like grad students and staff, and we have an adjunct on our team. So now we have shared office hours so that when a researcher comes in, they could have questions about data or computing, or as we're finding more and more, questions span both areas. So we're able to provide them more holistic service. So since campus is shut down, of course, we've moved this virtually, and it's going super well, actually. And I'm really glad that we've had this opportunity to explore this, because we found that we are getting more customers because we can reach more people. They don't have to come to a location on campus. We've developed a nice workflow. So one thing that we've learned is that there needs to be somebody there who's just playing the host. At first we tried to, during my office hours, if I was supposed to be consulting, I was also kind of hosting, but then if somebody came in with a question for me, then that got very awkward. So now we have somebody just assigned there to be the host, and we're using Zoom because that's what our campus told us that we should be using. So the host comes in and they make like 7 breakout rooms right away. And then we have the consultants, and we're all sitting in the main channel. We're worried about Zoom bombing, so we've set up a waiting room. So essentially, a researcher will come, they'll be in the waiting room, we'll look at them, we'll see that they have a Berkeley address. The host lets them into the main room, they ask their question, and it's usually pretty obvious who they should pair with, one of the consultants. And then as the host, I'll assign them to these small breakout rooms. A little trick about breakout rooms is that you can't make more as you're going. So you just have to set up like 10 right away. At first I set up 1, and then another researcher came, and you can't add to it. So we definitely learned that. So we're taking appointments in a lot of ways. We're usually mixed. So before it was walk-in office hours, now it's virtual office hours. People can write us emails, they can submit tickets if it's more of like a, how do I install this thing on the cluster? So we're getting questions in from a lot of different ways, but the virtual office hours are going really, 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 really well. The other thing that, yeah, go ahead.
I just had a quick question. How often are you offering them?
Oh yeah, twice a week. So Wednesday afternoons and Thursday mornings. And we try to offer them on alternate days because class schedules tend to be like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Tuesday, Thursday. So we thought one afternoon, one morning to try to reach the maximum number of people. We are tracking all of our consultations in Asana. Some of you might know that tool. And we've added a separate tag, a COVID-19 tag, to track if we're working with researchers who are trying to solve this major global problem. And then we're also tracking, normally we would track like if it was a drop-in versus an email ticket, we're tracking if it's like a virtual drop-in, so that we will have some real data after this to say, look, normally we get this many, because we're virtual, we have this many more. I really suspect, actually, I know going forward, we're going to offer both once we're back on campus. So I will have a virtual and an in-person drop-in. Maybe the last thing I'll mention is that we're working really closely with our data, or our social sciences data lab, D-Lab, and then also our Division of Data Science, Computing, and Society. We're trying to coordinate between us. We are doing a undergraduate consulting program. So it's like undergrads consulting with other undergrads about data and some computing. We're just kind of starting to venture into that space. And so each of these different groups has a consultant that they put in the pool. And so that's been really nice, because it's like no matter which point of entry people come, whether it's through these undergrad programs, whether it's through the D-Lab, the library, they all kind of get into the same central pool. So we started working on that, but this emergency has made us like even more like we really have to come together and get organized. So it's been actually quite positive.
That's great to hear. I have one more quick follow-up on that. So how long are the online sessions usually?
Yep, an hour and a half.
Got it. Okay, Terrific. I wish we had time to just dig into this for quite a bit, because there's a lot of material there that I want to copy and paste into my environment. But we need to switch it up and move over to remote training. So let's actually, Amy or Anita, yes, let's go ahead and ask you, can you talk a little bit about any remote training that you've been providing and what your experiences have been there?
Okay, yeah, so for remote training, again, we've been offering all of our training sessions remotely for several years now, from when we picked up Utah State University. I don't remember, we used something, it might have been a Skype for Business originally, but we switched to Zoom about 3 years ago. We basically give trainings on a regular schedule. We post the semester schedule, and we have a wide range of topics, starting with just an overview of what we offer, and then we have a lot of hands-on. We're moving more and more to hands-on. We have some intro to Linux, intro to Python, how to use Slurm modules, and then we go into more advanced topics of parallel programming, etc. But basically, what we found that works well is we do it via Zoom, but anytime you're doing a presentation that does involve hands-on, it really helps to have multiple people there. We have at least 2, and that helps that one can focus on the chat, and then when the exercises are being done, there are enough people, there are at least 2 people that can handle the questions that come up. Handle questions where it be a chat for the most part, but we also have it set up so that anybody that's remote can speak up and be heard by the entire audience in the room, which we no longer have, but so we do that. And we've had attendances up into the 40s and 50s this way, and we find more and more users, even if they're on campus, prefer to sit in their office and they do it remotely. So we'll be talking in an auditorium with 3 or 4 people, and we'll have 30 or 40 online. You know, over the last few years, it's worked really smoothly, and we have gotten a lot of feedback from our people in Utah State that it's going well, and the people seem to ask questions. You know, they don't just sit there silently. You're right. You know, you never know what if they're just you know, multitasking and doing a lot of other things and only sort of listening in on you. But we do seem to get questions as if they're following along with us. We haven't dealt with breakout rooms, at least I haven't, for the topics that I teach. But you know, I can see that might be useful if somebody has an in-depth question that you might want to break it out into that. Let's see.
Anita, I have a quick question for you. Did you find it, did you find there was a transition period in your teaching from when you went from in-person to teaching over Zoom? Did you have to kind of approach that differently, or did it translate kind of in an immediate fashion?
Since we were doing both, we were in person in front of the people who decided to come to the auditorium, and doing it in Zoom. At least for my personally, I can't speak for my colleagues. There wasn't much of a transition. We approached it very much the same way, other than the initial setup of setting up the speaking, the communications portion of it. So I really didn't change anything in the way I approached it between the two.
Got it.
I have yet to do it. I have yet to be on the schedule from when we are only going remote. So only my colleagues have done that in the last several weeks. I just haven't been on the schedule. Yeah, and so we don't tend to record these. I don't know if that was a question. It was early on. Unless we get a specific request. Sometimes somebody will say, you know, after we announce them, that they'd like us to, you know, they want, they can't attend, they'd like to attend, but they, you know, have a conflict. And so we will do that, and then just share that link with the people that are requesting it, because we don't want to post them because of all the ADA type captioning and so forth and so on. So instead we have a set of how-to videos that are short videos, single topics, that we point people to, And we are working on expanding those, especially for our hands-on, like our Python and our Intro to Linux. We're trying to come up with a nice series on those based on our presentations.
Thank you, Anita. Again, I really wish we could dig in here because there's a lot of really great material there. All right, Amy, let's go ahead and hear about some remote training from your end.
Yeah, so again, we haven't been doing this until now, so seeing it as an opportunity. And what we normally do is we will record our in-person and then we'll stick it up on our YouTube channel, because like Anita was saying, we always get requests of people that can't come or whatever. So another thing that we normally do in person that we're going to be translating to the virtual environment is that we have our consultants available either before or after the session or both. And so if it's like getting started using our cluster, for example, like people can come and get their questions answered before the training even starts. So we're going to do similar kind of thing with like breakout rooms that I described before. I have found, so we haven't done one yet, but we have one scheduled for the 20th about writing code in parallel. And I have found that it's been more of a collaborative spirit, I guess, in teaching it. Normally it's just like, oh, 1 or 2 people, the usual people will teach the thing. But in this case, it's a group of 6, and we're collaborating with our colleagues up at the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and offering it to them as well. So again, this online platform is really an opportunity to like work together better even within our team and across other teams and then reach more researchers. Last time I looked, we had 90 some people registered for this training and it's still a little ways away. So we'll see how many people actually show up. But again, I really think that actually offering things remotely is more inclusive. More people can come. And I also feel that it is more inclusive of different types of learning styles. You were saying just a few minutes ago that like you see people asking questions, and I think more different types of people are comfortable asking questions in a virtual environment than like raising their hand in front of like 60 people. So I'm really excited about that. I am planning to survey everybody after the fact, and in addition to like, did we meet your needs and did you feel included and all of that, I'm going to ask explicitly about what people thought of the remote option and if they prefer it, because I suspect that might be the case, but I want to get some actual data on that. A challenge that I see is that we often will do like some community building after the training. Like I order a big stack of pizzas and then people hang out afterward and eat pizza and talk about their research. So I'm not sure how to do that in an online environment yet, but that's something that I'm thinking about. And if anybody else is thinking about that, I'd love to put our heads together.
Thank you so much, Amy. That, again, that's just it's such an interesting time that we all need to make these shifts, and it's really great having this conversation. I'm also teaching on April 22nd, and I've been building out, kind of thinking about Zoom in a new way for teaching, and this is all helping inform me. So thanks again, and thank you very much, Anita. All right, so I'm handing it over now to actually Amy and Martin are going to be co-moderating a community discussion on this topic. So take it away, Amy and Martin.
All right, so how are we gonna do that?
So can I jump in real quick?
Sure.
We've already had some chatter in the chat about, so some people asked about Asana, and I think some other people are using tools. I think it would be good to focus on training. I think there's some great questions in the chat right now that we could address first. But if your team is using a tool like Asana or Basecamp or something, throw it into the notes. I think it'd be great to get a list of what kind of like team infrastructure tools or practices people are using to coordinate their efforts to provide user support. So those who contributed stuff in the chat, put in the doc, and then maybe we can get to it if we have some time at the end. So I'm always interested in these workflow type things.
Yeah,
Yes,
Christina, do you think?
I think it will be a good topic if we have some more time today, or for a future call, how project management tools essentially. right? So I admit that we don't really use them much, but I think probably would be useful to do that. So I would like to hear from those that do use them, and you know how good they are and things like that. But anyway, let's jump on some questions here that are related to the presentations. And the first one, let's see, that is an interesting one. How do you manage training when screen interactions is needed? And honestly, I will maybe answer quickly from my experience. We don't really do too much things that require screen interaction. Maybe Gladys, if you have some example that you would like to share with us, where you would find it necessary, let us know. And maybe does Anita or Amy have some feedback on that?
Well, Martin, I'll just jump in. I know I thought you had played with the fast X options for screen sharing at one point.
Yeah, so in screen share, the main type of screen shares I have done before with consultations was back when we were still using Skype, and I would just let people use I would have like a one-on-one chat with them on a Skype and have them share the screen for me. And that works fine. So I mean, pretty much any communication platform allows you to share screen, and so I would just do it that way. I actually haven't used the fastest screen sharing.
Oh, okay, I thought you had, because I know that's an option, but I really haven't explored it because I haven't had a case that I needed it.
Right.
To jump in, the last time I did an introduction to Linux session online, I thought it was hard to look at people's screens and understand what they're working on. So the next time, I think what we're going to try is to have one person share their screen for one exercise and then let them work through it instead of sharing just our screen. So Zoom sharing screen again is helpful. Thank you.
So, hello everyone, this is Gladys. So one of the things that I've been seeing online, some faculty members teaching their classes is they have a particular lecture, day A, and then they have like a lab session where exercises are being worked. Let's say they're using Python. So during that session, it's more interactive. So students are able to share their screen, but it becomes a little bit disruptive if you have a lot of students in the session and everyone wants to share a screen. So it has to be one at a time. And I guess the way to do it would be choosing a topic. If you have you need to have an exercise list of things that you're going through so that, it can be a little bit of flow during that time. Usually it's an hour or so, but it's still, trying to find a way how to make it less disruptive is still an issue. And so far, if you are just doing a static session, it works completely fine. But if you had to be showing something through the command line, then you have to do the screen sharing. And I guess, it's still a work in progress.
Yeah, so the way what I found kind of useful, I don't know if one of you have, some of you have followed the GPU Technology Conference, which NVIDIA canceled, and they are having online sessions. So what they do is they have 5 break rooms, and then, well, in their case, they basically have the people, one person per break room manning the break room, and they are just fielding more sort of on a target questions in those break rooms. But I think that could be actually a pretty interesting idea if you would just come up, let's say, with 10 break rooms, but you would have to really have the manpower to man each of them, and then you could flip, the users that need help and have them share screen inside of the break room.
Yeah, I was going to add that I feel like the approach that Amy was describing for office hours, that requires a lot of staff though, that you can have multiple breakout rooms with people in them. But another option might be to use breakout rooms and have the students help each other if you don't have the staff. That would definitely be an experiment, but
the one thing with the breakout rooms that we found with, and this is true if you're using a smaller number of people, at least in a lot of the conference, like with the ACI, with the virtual residency and some of those other places when they've used breakout rooms. And even as UD has moved online courses, you really have to have multiple people assigned to those breakout rooms as far as a host, because if the person who's hosting closes the window, it sort of becomes this room that's not active, that people can't do stuff, and you have to close it and then reopen it. But the idea of the breakout rooms, and I agree with Christina, I think it's a good idea if you could assign somebody and assign a host of one of the students and almost put them in groups to have them work together, and then have somebody share that screen back later for their solution, and then you'd have a much smaller number of people sharing their screens after the fact of what they did.
So I'll share what we've been doing at HBS, because we've been planning this for about 3 weeks now for all of our technical instruction. And the whole thing on the breakout rooms, we spent an hour playing with breakout rooms just to get it working correctly. And we assigned multiple co-hosts, and what we found is that you can pre-assign people to rooms if you have a list of people. We also wanted to simulate the in-class experience, so allow people to be with their preferred partner or work colleagues, so they could actually tell us their preferences, especially before going into exercises where people can work together, and or support the same thing. But what we did find is that we have one presenter and 2 helpers, and the primary helper is the host. So the instructor is never the host, because they can control everything, and we don't want them to have to leave the room and control the breakout rooms. So your primary helper is the host, everybody else are co-hosts, and with that capability, all the co-hosts, they can go into one breakout room and they can move around any breakout room. And so that allows the flexibility of people going into a room, and then one of the co-hosts can join them to help them at any point in time. And that's actually been helpful. We're about to enter our 2 workshops tomorrow, including, thanks Sarvani, I'm doing Unix tomorrow, so we'll see how that goes. And we are doing teachable moments as well. So get somebody to share their screen, but only if it takes about a minute or 2 or less to troubleshoot. So great ideas.
Kevin, could you talk a little bit about the pre-registration thing you popped into the chat? Because that sounds like maybe a good solution for people who don't really have a lot of staff.
Sure. I didn't expect that, but we set up a thing so that people can come to our website and register to say, hey, we're doing 3 30-minute slots per room across 2 rooms, so 6 slots a day, 4 days a week, and doing that with just 2 staff members by having them each camp on a room, and then people sign up for a slot, an available slot, and then we kind of know who's going to show up when and where and things like that. And it keeps our links behind a login, so we don't get Zoom bombed, hopefully.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, I have to admit I got kind of lost in all the chat replies.
If I could just have a follow-up question with Kevin about that. When you're doing the time slots and that sort of thing, are the rooms such that they're in, you kind of have a waiting room?
No, the room is the waiting room. So there's no waiting, you just show up at your time. If you show up early, people would probably be like, hey, I'm still talking to somebody else, and would just, you're just gonna have to wait.
Okay. So I guess if you did use a waiting room for the room, in those time slots, you could let somebody in and out, and you can communicate with them if they're waiting in the room, correct?
I'm not sure I understand, because we don't have a waiting room.
I mean, that's just an option to put on the room to say that it's a waiting room. So every time somebody connects, then they actually wait there until you let them in.
I see what you're saying. I'm not sure. We're also not using Zoom, so something may be different.
Oh, probably, yeah.
I wouldn't recommend doing that, because people who are in waiting rooms are pretty much, they're like the zombie people. They're isolated. They can't talk to anyone. They're just stuck sitting waiting. I think let them into the main room as a virtual waiting room, as a place to hang, and then put them in the breakout room makes a lot more sense.
I kind of like that idea. We didn't land on that, but I do kind of like that idea.
I think that one of the limitations that can be with having people to sign before coming to the meeting, I mean, I am all for organization, believe me, but you want to motivate students to actually to have the freedom to just pop into a meeting, right? And so we try to keep it open. We have our consultations hours happen 3 times a week, and we do it for 2 full hours. And so we allow people, you know, to jump in. It might take just 15 to 30 minutes and they are done. But we remain in that time period for the 2 hours because we have a lot of some users that just jump into a meeting. One way to secure that, you know, we don't get Zoom bombing is just when we set up our meetings, we are users need to authenticate to be able to get into the meeting. And so that's one way to control. We would like to have more, you know, if there were more students, perhaps we will have to use the waiting rooms, but so far right now, just allowing the opportunity to users to just feel the freedom to jump into a meeting in that 2 hours of period, I think that has been useful.
I'm really sad that we lost that because that was a big feature, I think, of what we were doing. And as Gladys knows, hi, nice to see you again, Gladys. This was just kind of what we came up with as a, you know, what can we do quickly to manage and still offer the service as best we can without changing things too much.
I did have a question for Amy, that you said that you were going to do the follow-up for the people who participated. Do you have a breakdown of the people who have participated, meaning like, was it mostly graduate students or students, faculty or staff? Could you talk a little bit about that for your online? Because I know that you said it's been very successful, and I found that as well when I moved my job remotely, that it seemed like people were much more interested in doing online training. But when asked about the follow-up after the fact, it was about a 50-50, meaning they would like to still potentially have in class, like a face-to-face option, but they like the convenience of the online.
Interesting.
But
so
it was
to answer
mostly
your
students.
Yeah, to answer your first question, it's mostly grad students specifically.
Same here.
Okay, yeah. So I'll be interested to see what people think. I do think we'll offer both in the future because I agree that there's a lot of different learning styles and different types of people, and we want to accommodate as many as possible. I see there's a lot of questions about advertising office hours and events and how we're doing that, and I can say a few words about Berkeley, and I'm glad to see my colleague Erin Kulich on the call here. Hey, Erin. So we have a built-in audience because we run a computing cluster. So the first thing we do is we email everybody who's already using our computing cluster. So that's already a huge chunk of people. And then really it's working with our campus partners. So the social sciences D Lab that I mentioned, Erin, who's on the call, works there. So we work very closely and advertise each other's training. So they'll advertise it in their newsletter. We also work with our Institute for Data Science, the Division of Data Science, Computing, and Society. So we have a really strong network and we advertise each other's things. We've also recently started a Facebook presence. And so I'm having students go through and look at everybody who's ever attended one of our workshops or anything, basically ever interacted with us, and try to find them on Facebook and build a community, and we'll advertise that way. Are other folks doing those things or other things to get the word out?
Amy, I like your Facebook idea. And one thing that we recently started was our GitHub page has this news part. And if there are any updates on Merced cluster, we're putting it out there. And the Zoom link for our virtual walk-in hours are on the message of the day on the cluster. So people who can actually log in are the only people who can see the Zoom login.
A lot of grad students use Slack. So, I mean, if you have something for that, a lot of the labs are on Slack. So some people will connect that way, but also a lot of students are on Twitter. And we seem to see a lot of, like, if you tweet it out or you put something out, students seem to find it, especially if you tag something that's related to research.
Hi, Sarvani. That's awesome to hear what you're doing with GitHub. That's interesting what you're saying about Twitter, because I'm actually a Twitter user, and I found we weren't getting a lot of traction on Twitter. And then the undergrads that I work with were like, Amy, nobody's on Twitter. That you're like, none of the audiences you're trying to reach are on Twitter. What are you doing? And so they were the ones that actually convinced me to start a Facebook page. So it's really intriguing to hear about the differences.
Maybe we should all do Instagram.
Well, is this a Facebook for work groups or just regular Facebook, or Facebook for companies?
Let me look. I'm actually not a Facebook user, so I don't even know the difference between those things, but let me just grab our page and put it in the chat.
So what social media are people using more prevalently now? So like, do you take an image of, make a slide and you take an image and post that on Instagram? I mean, what seems to be most effective?
A lot of votes for
effective.
I say,
but I will tell you, because our IT department Twitter feeds for status and updates and things like that, I think people have a tendency then to follow, and I think it's being used at the University of Delaware in that way. So maybe that's why it's more effective, that people are following it because tweets are coming out about things that they need to know about. So maybe that's why.
A lot of votes for word of mouth in the chat here. Because I think this question is, it's an ongoing, like, we had to advertise these events before. And so a lot of those same channels can still be used. But word of mouth looks differently when you can't talk to people in person. I think it's a great point from Kevin about consistency also. Like having a pattern, because then people get it in their heads and know to even look for the things you're advertising.
So maybe I'll twist up, I'll change the topic here a little bit, because kind of the way how I'm thinking about, the remote support, in our experience, or in my experience at least, things haven't really changed as much, except that we don't see people in person, right? Because we've been using the ticketing system service now in our case, so our probably 80% of our interaction is through the tickets anyway, so that was already remote. There was, as Anita said, our lectures have been remote already too. So what I would like to hear from other people, how much they had to change to make things different. And it kind of sounds like other sites have made more efforts, for example, to do more interactive teaching, which we haven't done. Yeah. Or does anybody have some other interesting tidbit on what they really had to change to start supporting the remote audience? Or maybe everybody's kind of like us and they just happily moved from their office to their basement and continue on, huh?
I think the biggest change, I'll jump in here, and I welcome other people jump in after me. I think office hours was a change. And Amy, it was really helpful to hear about your process, because that's something that was very sort of organic in terms of people showed up and we could just like move around and talk, and that's much harder to do online. But I think the other biggest change is just working with our team remotely. There's no more like walk down the hallway and like stick your head in people's doorways and like take up their time. So yeah, thinking really intentionally about hopping on calls with people when I want to talk to them. We've been using our chat, we're using Slack internally a lot more than even we were before. But thinking about how to maintain those really productive collaborative relationships when you can't see each other or interact more casually has been the biggest change for me. So I don't know if other people have similar experiences or other things they've tried that have been hard.
So Christina, this is Anita. We've moved heavily onto Slack. We've had the Slack channels, but yes, we're making it, a point of checking in with each other, you know, saying we're online, offline, just throwing tidbits, things everybody needs to know. Actually having these virtual coffee breaks a couple times of the day on a fixed schedule that anybody can pop in and pop out. Friday happy hours virtually. Just trying to stay connected. But yes, when you're used to just walking down the hall, you know, it's a little more complex. You know, you write out that email saying, hey, XYZ, are you guys available? Let's find a time. I need some help on this. And so, you know, it's making things take a little bit longer, making the arrangements, but it's working.
We too have 2 times a week that we just have holds on, and we had those before. Actually, we call them like dev meetings or development meetings, and it's just like if we all need our brains on something or figure out a problem, we can reserve one of those dev slots, and if we don't need one, we just cancel it. So that's kind of a nice thing as well. If it's just like, oh, this thing came up and we weren't expecting it, let's all put our brains together. Another thing I'm thinking about is I want to try to host a virtual game night for my consulting team, because we tend to play board games together as like a community building thing. So I'm in the process of figuring out how to get on Steam and how to be a game master. Is anybody doing anything like that?
Looks like yes.
Oh, go ahead. And we have one other question that a person, Anne, bumped up, which might be kind of interesting. And I have to admit, we don't do anything like that, or we don't support this yet. How do people handle virtual teaching engagements accessible for learners with disabilities? Is anybody doing something like that? Or has any idea how it can be done?
Well, closed captioning comes to mind right away. And I did some investigatory looking into how to do that for the classes that I'm teaching. I did not find a free option for live transcription into closed captioning via Zoom, which is the tool I'm using. So I don't have a resolution here. But Amy, you mentioned about putting recordings up on YouTube. I mean, I've been really impressed with the closed captioning that YouTube does after the fact. So that's a piece of that. But I'd be interested also to hear if other people have had any work in the closed captioning space for live teaching.
I was just going to throw in that Zoom is fully accessible, capable. We looked into that for before we started actually doing our teachings as well, but we haven't actually made use of it.
Amy, I saw your hand. Do you want to chime in here?
Yeah, this is actually, Megan just put this in chat as well, but Google Slides has a live closed captioning. If you present, you can click the closed caption, and it's not awesome, but it's better than nothing.
Great, thank you.
Google Meet also has the closed captioning option. And I'll add one other thing to the previous question, that we've had a couple teams who've really missed working co-located. And so we've opened some chat or some Zoom instances for folks to just drop in at any time during the day. So they're just wide open Zoom instances. People come in and out just to work in parallel together and visit and catch up. Also to the gaming question, we have a couple D&D groups that meet during lunch, and they've been continuing to meet during lunchtime via Zoom as well.
Yay, Zoom D&D, that's amazing.
Okay, Aaron, you have something to say?
Yeah, I was going to say with Zoom, if you do record to cloud, it automatically does a transcription for you, and it's pretty darn good. And when you share the video with people, it's automatically synced up with it. Along with it, it does record the entire chat. So like this whole thing will be transcribed since you're recording it. Except Bob, whoever's recording it, looks like you're recording not to the cloud.
Correct, yeah, I'm doing it locally, and then we upload it to YouTube. So I think we get the closed captioning there automatically.
Oh yeah, so try record to cloud next time, and then you can compare the transcripts between YouTube and Zoom. And with Zoom, you can use a third-party service to make the transcripts even better.
Great idea. We'll give that a try. Thank you.
And then for games, Jackbox Games has some large-scale fun things that integrate with Zoom and Steam. So that's something to check out.
Aaron, let's set something up.
Yeah, we can do it for up to like 113 participants, which there just happens to be here today.
Oh,
Next researcher-facing call.
That sounds fun.
Leverage over IP, VoIP.
I'll also mention that we've moved one of our events online as well. We have a monthly meetup and it's around cloud computing, and that is now all virtual as well, and we record that. And I mentioned that because at the last meetup, we did a bunch of data gathering about what people like and what we could do to make them feel more included. And I used a tool called Mentimeter that I've used a couple times now. And I'll put the link in the notes in the chat with all of you because it's a really cool interactive way. Users can use their phones and answer questions, and it generates like word clouds and things like that. So I would recommend that for an interactive. You could use that in your teaching as well.
So we got a question from Carl, probably for Aaron. When you record to the cloud, can you upload it to YouTube?
Yeah, the best thing, so Zoom, you can share it directly to people on Zoom. It stays there for 30 or maybe 90 days before it gets deleted. I think you can pay Zoom to keep it there indefinitely, but you could also download it, including the transcripts, and upload both of those to YouTube.
Oh, cool.
The other nice thing about it is you can require people to register to get access to the link. So that way you see each person who's actually looking at it and it's not just shared widely.
Okay, so we got 5 more minutes left. So does anybody have something that they feel strongly about that you want to say or share with us?
I'll add that I added to the notes some links from the Carpentries, which recently came out with some recommendations on teaching online. It's quite extensive, and some of it is very specific to their teaching model. But I think there's some great tips that we've already touched on here, like the importance of having kind of a Zoom wrangler and a separate instructor, the importance of really preparing in advance. I think that's less optional when you're teaching online, and just having a good support team to make all these things possible. The technology, for the most part, is there. It's more just familiarity and being able to work together. So there's a great list. And then I also linked a blog post of someone who did teach remotely. And there's a great post of tips for learners that I think could be well repurposed to like send out to people who are registered for trainings. So check out those links in the notes.
I just had one question for all the people who have been doing online learning. One of the first experiences I had was to try to follow that software carpentry. So I did a pre and a post questionnaire to try to align people's skills prior to the actual training. Has anybody had that experience where like somebody is like such a novice and somebody else is like more advanced, but they need to kind of get there for some of the lessons? Did you guys have other people use like that pre and post questionnaires to try to gauge people on their beginning knowledge and ending knowledge, similar to what the carpentry stuff?
We haven't done that explicitly, but in our registration form, especially if it's like an intro to using our cluster, we'll say, you know, we're hoping that folks are familiar with these topics. Here's some links to do some self-learning. And then we also provide that consulting before the session to get people up to speed kind of quickly, right on the spot before they enter the training session. But I do like what you're suggesting of surveying that.
Yeah, but I guess my comment here would be, how do you incentivize people to actually fill in these questionnaires? That was kind of our sticky point when we were trying to introduce these only post, not pre, that we had maybe like 20 or 30% people that responded. So, you know, when we have 10 people in a room, then we have 2 or 3 people answering. So we just decided it was really not worth the effort.
All right, so I just want to thank everybody. Thank you. This conversation has been so helpful. I'm really so excited about incorporating these ideas. So a couple of announcements. If you haven't yet signed into the call, please do so now. The link is in the chat, though maybe one of the other steering committee members could repost it just because there's been so much chat, which is fantastic. Just a reminder, this call was recorded. You'll be getting an email with a link to the recording, and that'll also have the call document link as well. Special thank you to our micropanel speakers today, Amy Neeser and Anita Ornt, and to our moderators, Martin and Amy. Today we talked about sharing best practices in remote user support and training, but big thank you to everyone who participated in the discussion today and all the comments in the chat. It's a new challenge for a lot of us. It sounds like we're trying a lot of new things and coming up with some new ideas. So let's keep this conversation going. Our next meeting is May 14. We are always interested in hearing suggestions for topics for us to discuss. So we also have a document coming in, or I'm sorry, a link in the chat for new topics. So if you have any ideas, please drop it in. And then thanks to the steering committee members who Bob already gave a shout out at the intro. So thanks for joining us, and stay safe, everybody. And we're looking forward to seeing you again in May.